whenever your mom has cancer, you have to see it like she has a fire inside of her body, and you need the fire department to show up. And whenever the fire department shows up to your house to put out a fire, they don't send you a bill.
We are Louisiana Indivisible. From New Orleans to North Louisiana, from Baton Rouge to the Bayou, from Shreveport to St. Bernard Parish, from Lake Charles to Lafayette to Leesville. Together, we can defend our democracy. We Are Louisiana Indivisible is highlighting people, politicians, and organizations across the state and region that understand there are no kings but king cakes in Louisiana, and that y'all will always mean all. Listen, share with your friends and neighbors, and help us work for a better tomorrow in Louisiana and beyond. Welcome to We Are Louisiana Indivisible. I'm your host, Joel Sharpton, and I am so excited to start 2026 with our first guest of the year, Conrad Cable, the farmer from Farmerville. Conrad, you're taking on a big job right now and trying to take on Mike Johnson in the 4th District of Louisiana. Welcome to the show.
I am, Joel, thank you so much for having me on. Happy New Year. And I'm really, really excited that 2026 is going to be a heck of a lot better than 2025 was, because the way that things are going, it's hard to think that they can get worse, right?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, Conrad, you and I, to be a little transparent for folks, you and I had a great conversation the other day. We had some technical difficulties. We didn't capture the final recording, so we're getting on here again on a Saturday night. You sent me a great message. You said, I don't have anything better to do on a Saturday night than politic. Amen, sir. That's the way to think about it. Look,
hey, we're fighting for our democracy, Joel.
That's it. And that's where I want to start, okay? Because it's something that you and I talked about previously, and you and I have talked about offline as well. But it's a very demoralizing time right now. Every time we turn on you told me before we started that you'd turn on CNN to try to catch up after a long day of work for yourself. We want to stay informed. We've got to stay involved and to know what's happening, to try to get the best sense we can of what's actually happening, not just what they're reporting to us that they're doing. But at the same time, we've got to get up every morning. We got to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, our loved ones, our communities, our businesses, our jobs, whatever it is. How do you try to stay motivated and positive when the news does continue to get worse, it feels like?
Look, I started this campaign because I wanted to feel like I was fighting back against what I think, frankly, are attacks on my community, and a way of governing that I think goes against the American ideals that I was taught by the people, the hardworking country people who raised me, did not teach me to vote the way that our country is being directed right now. And so I think that it's a huge problem, but what keeps me motivated is that there is an energy and electricity out there, not just with Democratic voters here in District 4, but there's a lot of people all over the political spectrum who feel disaffected, and they see the lack of leadership and the utter failures that Mike Johnson is putting on display for us on, C-SPAN or Fox News or even Newsmax for everyone to see. To be honest, it's embarrassing for Louisiana. I think that it is unconstitutional the way that he is leading the House of Representatives by not holding the executive in check. And he should know better because he studied law at our public university down there at LSU. And so what makes me really upset is that he uses his training in the Constitution to dismantle the Constitution every day. But people are waking up all over the district, all over the state, and all over the country. I ask people, what has Mike Johnson done for you since he has been in office since 2016? Nobody has been able to give me a good answer, Republican, Democrat, or independent.
Genuinely. He has just completely abdicated his responsibility to Louisiana citizens, particularly. I get pushback anytime I bring you up or this race up at all from some of my neighbors, and they say, well, it's so important for Louisiana to have that speaker position. He's done nothing from that speaker position from the citizens or for the citizens of Louisiana. Let's talk a little bit specifically about some of the things that would be priorities for you when you do take that seat. We've obviously got a few elections between here and there. We're going to talk about the dates. We've got a Democratic primary coming up in the spring. In the summer, we'll have the runoff, and then the general election is in November. And obviously, these are long odds. Mike Johnson's got a lot of money behind him. But when the people do finally get wise to the bag of baloney that he's selling, Conrad, and they choose you, what are your priorities for the folks from Louisiana, and what could you do from that 4th district seat?
Sure. So I believe that organized people beat organized money. And so that's why I wouldn't be running this race if I did not think that I had a chance to beat Mike Johnson. And I think that because I am a young small business owner who has worked hard and chosen to stay here in Louisiana to try to make my community a better place. I think that because my wife and I are hardworking people who show up, 5, 6 days a week to our jobs. And any small business owner can tell you that most of us work way more than 40 hours a week. But I have had so much meaning brought to my life by trying to live my version of the American dream. But the sad truth is that so many rolls of the dice landed right for me, and that doesn't happen for every person. And so you can go to my website, Conrad for Congress 2026.com, and you can see our really bold plan to make government work for working people. I believe that healthcare is a human right, and that everyone, no matter who you are, what your job is, or what your medical condition is, you should be able to get the treatment that you need without going bankrupt. Uh, a surgeon put it, I had a conversation with a surgeon from St. Francis a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that whenever your mom has cancer, you have to see it like she has a fire inside of her body, and you need the fire department to show up. And whenever the fire department shows up to your house to put out a fire, they don't send you a bill. So I really loved that analogy. It put it in some really good terms that I think a lot of people would agree with. Another thing that we have to do is on a federal level, raise the minimum wage. If you work any type of hours in this country, you deserve to be paid a wage that shows you dignity and respect, and $7.25 is not that. I also believe that more people need to have access to good union jobs so that they can have representation in their workplace besides just collecting a paycheck. I also believe that we have to, forgive the pun, but we got to weed out corruption. And that is a bipartisan issue that I talk to people all the time. And people see folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene going into Congress worth $700,000 net worth and coming out being worth like $25 million. And we hear people like Speaker Mike Johnson say that unless members of Congress are allowed to buy and sell and trade stock, then they are not going to run for Congress because you're not going to have qualified people work a job that's really hard for only $175,000 a year. And I could care less where a member of Congress is sending their kid to private school. If you can't get by on $175,000 a year, then I'm sorry, buddy, but your lifestyle is a little out of control.
Well, and here's the thing that kills me on that, Conrad, because this is a particular bugaboo for me. My thing is, I don't even mind people in governmental positions taking advantage of the fact that they have incredibly powerful networks that they're interacting with and leveling up in society. I think that's fine. I think that's sort of normal. Here's what's a bad idea. The people with the inside secret confidential information from congressional meetings and hearings, they don't get to trade individual stocks with that secret insider information. I mean, Martha Stewart went to jail for a lot less than what these congressional representatives and senators are doing on a regular basis. And
Exactly.
it is infuriating, particularly when even the slightest gesture in the direction of fairness and like let's remove a little bit of corruption gets pushback in that, well, we wouldn't have anybody run for Senate then. Well, good, I say then, actually. If that will hold you from running for Congress, then you shouldn't have run for Congress in the first place. All right, we're far afield here for a second. Let me get back on track. Conrad, the biggest problem I think that we are currently facing, the most exacerbating issue across our country, but it's also happening here at home, is this occupation by ICE. And worse than the occupation by ICE, I would say, is the federal administration, the Trump administration especially, continued just freeness to disregard records, video evidence that we're seeing of what's happening and telling us what we're seeing is not true, what happened didn't happen, making blanket statements like ICE agents have immunity. Nobody has immunity from the law. The president doesn't have immunity from the law, regardless of what the Supreme Court has hinted at previously. What can we as individuals do about it, particularly for Louisianians, when we know our representatives, effectively every single one of them, is on board with this? Calling their office feels like not an action, even when I do still think it has value. We can slow down those offices. We can take up the time of those staff members, and we can pile up the records showing that their constituents are genuinely against this. That's hard to ignore, even when their moneyed interests are going to make them ignore it. But what else can we do, Conrad? What are you doing right now?
Well, I think that we have to beat these guys at the ballot box. That's what 2026 and flipping the House and taking back control during the midterm elections is all about, is holding these guys accountable, auditing ICE, and making sure that we stop these illegal invasions and incursions and persecutions of brown communities in this country. What we have to get back to where Ellis Island was a symbol. And I was just brought up with being taught to have a lot of respect for immigrants. We are just throwing out so many constitutional rights of due process. And, ICE is at our universities going after students on their visas, trying to improve their education and make the world a better place. What is happening? So, we really have to, it starts at the ballot box, because we're not going to be able to not just hold ICE accountable, but to hold people like Mike Johnson accountable, to hold the Trump administration accountable, because we have to repeal these tariffs that are a stranglehold on our local economies. We have to hold the Trump administration accountable for the blatant corruption. I mean, the president went into office making more money off of crypto than he ever made off of real estate. And every single week, I feel like it's some infomercial of him hawking some new merch that he's coming out with. So we just really have to beat these guys at the ballot box. That is the only way that we can fight back. And so that's what I have been trying to do. I believe that every single person needs to do their best to register 10 people to vote. And that starts with people in your house, making sure that your parents, your grandparents, your cousins, your brothers and sisters, your husbands and wives are all registered to vote. And then whenever election day comes, we have a primary election this year for this race is going to be on May 16th. So whenever May 16th rolls around, and then whenever the general election in November comes around, you got to take 10 people to the polls. And I think that it starts with getting in touch with your loved ones again, knocking on your neighbors' doors and checking in on them. And maybe after you've knocked a couple of times, you ask them about their voter registration if they need a ride to the polls. So that's what I think people need to do. I think we have to think about it in terms of our streets and our precincts and our wards that we all live in. You can look all that up by downloading the Go Vote app, GEAUX. And oh no, did I spell that wrong?
UX. Yeah, you got it.
GEUX, yeah.
Yeah, you got it. You and I both. We come from the wrong end of Louisiana to spell go that way properly,
Brother,
don't we?
I have an English degree too, and Dr. John is one of my favorite musicians. So I'm pretty Louisiana, but I grew up in the 4-H program, and I had so many friends from all over the state, and I just got to meet so many great people. I always wanted to be a little Cajun.
It's well, it was absolutely the cool place to be. It's funny, I've got a son named Remy, and he was telling me not too long ago, he's 16 now. He said, Dad, all the time I mention my name to somebody new, and they say, "Are you named after the rat that can cook from that Ratatouille movie?" And he was bummed about that. And I said, "Son, you correct him. You say, no, I came before that rat. I'm named after the X-Man. I'm Gambit, baby. That's Remy LeBeau right there." So yeah. I like that Cajun accent too. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the other big problems in this state specifically. The national climate is so demoralizing, but I like, by the way, that you said it's all about the ballot box. There's currently this nonsense that Trump especially is saying, oh, maybe we postpone the elections, maybe we cancel the elections, Insurrection Act or this or the other thing. That's not going to happen. And anybody talking about that is a distraction, honestly. The elections are going to happen. We need everybody to stay involved and stay active and motivated. That defeatist attitude is the way that they could possibly win this fight, honestly. Their
Yes,
ideas fail. They can win only if we give up and retreat. So stay active and
exactly.
involved. But let's talk about specifically some of the big issues that I think are affecting us on a more local level. Let's start at the top, though, with Governor Landry. Of the many unconstitutional things that the Trump administration has done, he's gone ahead and broken some of the parts of the Constitution here in Louisiana as well. Governor Landry has taken an unconstitutional position in the federal government as an envoy to Greenland because the Trump administration has decided to destroy the NATO alliance, the most important treaty I think that America is part of. First of all, how silly is this?
It's
And
ridiculous. It's about as
how
silly as the tiger at the LSU game, you know?
I mean, it's more expensive in the end, and it's just as big a waste of time. What can we do? What sort of messaging can we use to help explain to our neighbors things where the immigration question doesn't always hit home with some of our neighbors here, especially in North Louisiana? They don't see it happening in front of them, and so it's out of sight, out of mind. They're hearing the propaganda. But this idea of taking on another territory, it's got nothing to do with us. We've already got a friendly relationship with that country, military bases in Greenland proper. There's no reason for us to control it directly. And it's overwhelmingly unpopular, too. If you poll Americans, 75% of Americans say we do not need Greenland and they don't want us to try to take it. So what does our messaging need to be to specifically show a pattern here that Landry is abusing his office and imitating Trump to do things that are not only against the law, but against the benefit of the Louisiana people?
Sure. I believe that this issue, not only is it ridiculous, but here in Louisiana, they don't let somebody serve in the state legislature and on the city council at the same time. And so I don't understand how someone is expected to not only lead a state, but to also be the czar of an incursion into a place for the natural resources. I think a lot of Americans are trying to see through this. I know that with everything going on with Venezuela right now, we see gas prices starting to come down. And I think that that is purposeful because they want people to get on board with, oh, I'm paying less at the pump. And so I'm going to support what is going on. But we have to call out this authoritarian, empirical attitude as anti American, which it is. We have been there to protect and develop the rest of the world. And I think that we have a long history. I was in the fourth grade whenever 9/11 happened, and then the fifth or sixth grade whenever the war in Iraq happened. And I just feel like my generation understands and does not want to see that happen again. And also, look, my next door neighbor is a Vietnam veteran, and I know for sure that he does not want to see American boots on the ground anywhere, even if it came down to the war in Ukraine. No one wants to see American boys and our beloved troops go and die, especially for natural resources, which America not only has so many natural resources, but I believe that we can work together with the rest of the world. And I'm just some country farmer from Union Parish, but I don't understand why Jeff Landry is all of a sudden a foreign policy expert and is making these decisions, not just for Louisiana, but for the United States. I think that we have to call it out. And, I also wanted to say earlier that what I've been saying to conservative folks who come to me and say, well, Joe Biden let in 22 million illegal immigrants into this country to take our jobs. Brother, if you're worried about an immigrant taking your job and you're not calling out artificial intelligence for how many jobs it is going to displace over the next decade, because the big, beautiful bill that Speaker Mike Johnson championed, that has no regulation on artificial intelligence for the next 10 years. And I just read an article and a study that Wells Fargo put out that speculated that by 2030, up to 13% of the US workforce could be displaced by AI. And that is something serious whenever this is the same government that could be dealing with that situation, who is already making historic cuts to national nutrition programs that have been proven to be a hand up, not a handout, and are, I think, absolutely essential. Providing healthcare and education and high quality food for people. That's what makes people productive citizens and members of our society. So I think we have to judge ourselves by how we treat the least among us. And that's real Louisiana values, right?
100%, 100%, Conrad. The thing that kills me with both the Trump administration and the Landry administration here at the state level is that their policies are not only fairly inhumane and cruel at times, but they are also fiscally irresponsible. They're both hemorrhaging money as well as goodwill and people resources and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, again, you feel like if we could get people in a room one-on-one, and that's why it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is like, hey, let's get the messaging out there. Let's get people understanding that there are progressive voices in our state. There are people that are looking at these problems from a different angle and that see a brighter future for ourselves and for our kids and for our grandkids in this state and beyond. And you were absolutely one of those voices that I'm looking to highlight. Specifically, I want to talk for a minute about healthcare. America spends more on healthcare than any industrialized nation, and our healthcare outcomes are worse than most of the major industrialized nations. We're not the worst, but we are very low and we're falling. Our infant mortality rates are climbing, particularly as the attack on women's rights, reproductive rights, continues to grow here in this country. The biggest thing, though, that I think is currently facing people is this incredibly high skyrocketing cost of healthcare and insurance. The ACA subsidies have they've expired. They have not been renewed. The House made a valiant effort at it. It was denied by the Senate. And now here we are with those costs going up. Meanwhile, Trump and Landry are offering $1 trillion to Greenland, but we got no money for anybody's health policies. First of all, what are we doing about this on a local level? How can people draw these stories out and share these stories, make it plain who's being affected by this, and maybe make a little noise? I am not of the opinion that this is over yet. There's a funding bill coming up at the end of January. I think the Democrats have some opportunities to push back on this. And as even Republican constituents continue to be hurt by it, I think that there's an opportunity for us to find some salvageable middle ground. It won't be a proper program, but it could be something. How do we start angling in that direction, Conrad? And how do we talk to our neighbors about what they're facing with healthcare costs?
Sure. We have to share our stories. On my social media, we're going to have a whole series on healthcare that is going to come out. And NPR was just at my farm a couple of weeks ago, and they interviewed my brother and my sister-in-law because they're one of those 7 million American families who are going to be or who are going to have their insurance policies changed because they were part of the ACA subsidy extension. And their healthcare bill, they got a letter in the mail saying it was going from $400 a month to $1,400 a month. And people all over this state and this country are going to have to make impossible decisions that they should never have to make because of this choice that was spearheaded by the Republican leadership in Washington. We cannot forget that Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise and Julia Letlow and Clay Higgins all championed this, and they come from a state where more than half of our budget, 52% of Louisiana's budget that the state legislature administered last year, came from the federal government. And Mike Johnson wants to get up there and talk about the socialist at the No Kings protest. And so the pot calling the kettle black. So
Yeah.
these guys, I think that we have to relate it that we have to make sure that people understand that there is someone who is in there's a family member, who is a neighbor, who is a loved one and a friend, someone at their church, someone they care about is a recipient of these government programs, whether it's the healthcare subsidies through the ACA or SNAP, EBT, or WIC, somebody that they know is going to be affected by this. And so, in a couple of years, whenever not just those 34 rural hospitals in Louisiana start to close, but whenever communities like Marion, my hometown of 1,000 people, whenever communities like that lose those rural healthcare clinics, we're going to be in a really bad way. So, whenever we win the midterms, we not only need to make sure that Medicare and Medicaid is fully funded, but we need to work together so that we can provide more people with healthcare, not fewer people. And I just have to say that whenever a political party is talking about taking food out of hungry mothers and kids' mouths, whenever they're talking about denying your grandparents health care, and whenever they're making it harder for every person to vote, they don't have your best interest in mind. And
Uh,
so, what I'm trying to be and what keeps me inspired is that there's a whole generation of young people who are standing up. And I'm from a rural place, I'm a good old country boy, but I am trying to be the change within the Democratic Party that I want to see, because it makes me sick that we have lost the ability to message and get things done for hardworking rural people in this country. And we have to reconnect with that if we want to win elections and then fundamentally change the systems that keep people from achieving the American dream, because we should have a government that is like a rising tide that lifts all of the ships. And that's why I support something like Medicare for all, because it goes back to the values that we have as Louisianans, where we love our neighbors and we want to treat people how we want to be treated.
we're ambitious and hardworking in this state too, and as the country as a whole, I think is that the American character is so entrepreneurial in spirit, and the idea that we have not gotten business-minded, financial-centered folks on board with the idea that universal health care would free up so many entrepreneurial opportunities. There are so many people with a brilliant business idea, a wonderful service plan that they could provide to the public that they aren't willing to try because they got to hold on to that insurance that whatever corporation has given them. And the fact that we can't get more conservative, libertarian minded people to understand that concept is the number one thing that kills me, honestly, about liberal politics in America. Conrad, is we've got such the winning formula and we can't get people on board with it. Blows my mind. Blows my mind.
I believe that poverty is violence and that crime happens whenever people are put in desperate situations and have to make impossible decisions that they shouldn't ever have to make because the system has failed them. You can go through Louisiana by zip code and you can make education outcome predictions. And so
Mm,
we have to do better. I go to these school board meetings, and one thing that I have, or like school board or police jury meetings, the biggest lesson that I have learned in this campaign is that there is such a big disconnect between the Republican leadership, whether it's in Baton Rouge or in Washington, D.C., and then boots on the ground conservatives who are publicly serving their communities, because every police juror knows what it's like to get federal funding so that they can get the roads fixed that people complain to them all the time about. Every school board member knows what it's going to be like this year whenever kids in their schools don't get the breakfast and lunch that they need. Because how can we expect kids to do well on the ACT whenever they don't have the nutrition for their brains to develop properly? And let me just go off a little bit on a tangent, because I got into politics through food policy advocacy. I started a farm because I wanted to make my community a healthier place. And whenever I was in 4-H, I did a service learning project where we grew around 3,000 pounds of food one summer, and I gave it all away to a lot of my elderly neighbors in the Linville, Marion community. And I saw firsthand just how people struggle to access fresh, healthy food in a rural community. And I mean, there were times whenever, like, say, I would knock on somebody's door and they would tell me to come in and put it in the fridge because they're in a wheelchair and they couldn't answer their own door. Folks around here live without air conditioning, and we have a third of rural Louisianans who don't have access to the internet. So, long story short, I believe that accessing fresh, healthy food is a human right, just like healthcare, just like clean drinking water. And I met Mike Johnson a couple of years ago, whenever I went to Washington, D.C. to lobby for the Farm Bill. And I asked him, plain and simple, in his office, could you please make it easier as for deregulation? I think he would like that. But I asked him to make it easier for small, medium, and regional farms to directly connect with SNAP, EBT, and WIC recipients, because right now, if you want to do that online, you have to go through a third party vendor, and it just costs the taxpayer even more money whenever we should be able to process that payment directly. And
And cuts
that's
your ever so tight margins as a farmer too. Like you got nothing to make money on to begin with. You're trying to provide a service to your community, and the government's getting in the way and making it not only harder but also less of a financial possibility.
Yeah. And look, Mike Johnson, before he was Speaker of the House, he was just our representative. He told me then that providing fresh, healthy food to people in the community on those programs was a bipartisan issue. And he said, quote, that's what they should be eating. And I think now, through the big, beautiful bill, we have had the average price per SNAP meal go from $2.10 to $1.60 a meal. And I want to see any of these leaders in Washington cook a meal for each member of their family and spend $1.60 for each family member. I don't think that these guys who even they don't even buy their own groceries. Like, when was the last time Mike Johnson went to the grocery store? Come on. It just makes me sick.
I think of the scene from Arrested Development where Mama Bluth says, "It's a banana, Michael. What could it cost? $5?" Yeah. These people are so removed from the day-to-day experience of their constituents, which is why, as we referenced earlier, when Mike Johnson says, "Oh, they've got to have unregulated ability to trade stocks, or the right people wouldn't come and take the office," on all of that, just all of that from right from the start.
We need people in office who have an understanding and the experience of what working people who are not thriving in America, who are just struggling to survive, because I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And I think that I have an understanding of the solutions that people in Louisiana and in this country need to be able to live their version of the American dream, because this version of freedom that Mike Johnson and the Trump regime are trying to shove down the pipe is not what the hardworking country people who raised me taught me about the United States.
100% agree with that. 100% agree. Okay, you mentioned we've got a Democratic primary coming up soon. Give us that date again if you got it there.
Yeah, it is May 16th. So that means that you'll want to be registered to vote by April the 16th, because we have a 30-day window. There's a 30-day cutoff, and then early voting will be a week before the election. So you'll want to make sure that you either get your mail in ballot or you early vote. And whenever you go to the polls, you have to take somebody with you. Like, whenever I first started getting active in politics, whenever my wife Emmy and I lived in Monroe, I was just astounded whenever I started looking at the numbers on voter turnout. I couldn't believe just how few people were turning out to the polls. And you know what? We get really unqualified folks like Governor Jeff Landry elected whenever people don't show up and turn out and vote. We saw, I had a lot of optimism, and I was really uplifted whenever we said no on all four of those unpopular amendments in Louisiana. And, the coalition that was able to stop that, I mean, Union Parish, a place that is really passed off as as a hyper conservative place, said no on all four of those amendments because people are waking up to what exactly is going on and the unpopular legislation. Because, like I said, there is such a big disconnect between the Republican leadership and the policies that they actually have
Yeah.
versus, the rhetoric that they like to espouse. And then what people who are conservative, hardworking people here deal with on a daily basis, because they're the ones ultimately who have to deal with the fallout. Because I know every single one of us feels absolutely taxed to death between your property taxes and your sales taxes, and then your income taxes on a state and federal basis. And that's why I'm such I'm so against the tariffs. And I think that Mike Johnson absolutely needs to be held responsible, and Congress has the authority to stop these tariffs. There are so many things that I used to use coffee as the example all the time, but that was so unpopular that he lifted that. For my business with my farm, there's so many things that say are products of Canada that we just cannot produce here in the United States that I rely on. And we live in a global economy. And like I said, I'm a good old country boy, and I realize that. Come on, what is going on?
I'm 100% with you, 100% with you. Especially you and I both come from fairly conservative upbringings, and the idea that the party of free trade, the party that brought us NAFTA, the party that said we're going to sell the best goods in the world and we're going to sell them to the whole world, and that's going to be the future for our children and our grandchildren, to be portraying this isolationist idea is just, I mean, again, it's crazy making. It's absurd to the
Look,
level that you I keep waiting for Ashton Kutcher to show up and tell me we're being punked, Conrad. Honestly, like, I feel like this is all a gag somehow. Somebody's gonna
look,
pull the curtain back.
I would like to say, just make a comment real quick, because Louisiana, it's not a red state, it's a rig state. We have a really long populist history in this country. I'm actually a fourth generation Democrat. Both of my grandparents on my mom and my dad's side were both Democrats. My dad's folks were hardworking union people. And my grandmother owned a cafe in Marion, my small little hometown. And so I saw firsthand what it means to retire with a pension versus what it means to retire as a small business owner. And I have to tell you that I have such a respect for the food bank and the service that they provide for the community and for these nutrition programs, because I saw what it meant for my grandmother to get one of those monthly boxes from the food bank, especially whenever she was just living on Social Security. And I was really taught, like, yes, we're brought up with these Christian values, right? And, the story of the Good Samaritan, my grandmother, she was the Sunday school teacher at Dean Baptist Church whenever I was growing up. So she really taught me that someone being your neighbor, it doesn't mean that they live next door to you. My family, my grandfather, I love my grandmother so much, but my grandfather died before I was born, but he was a World War II veteran. And whenever the New Deal happened, the CCC came through and absolutely saved my grandfather and his brothers and kept them all employed. They all faithfully served their country during World War II. So I was really brought up with an understanding that people are called to serve their community, and also that you're supposed to look out for your friends and your neighbors. And it breaks my heart in a lot of ways that our culture in rural places has gotten so far away. But I just think that the propaganda apparatus through, the algorithms, or through the propaganda that comes through off of Fox News or whatever, it just cooks people, man. And it leads people to abandon a lot of their critical thinking. And like we talked about a little bit last time, just the fact that people with different political opinions don't sit together at the pews on Sunday mornings anymore has just so fundamentally changed our society to where people live in their bubbles and echo chambers. I think that I'm the right person to run for this office because I grew up here and my folks have lived in Union Parish for 6 generations. And if I wasn't able to be friends with conservative folks, then I wouldn't have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
But I really believe that I understand the values that we all have, and I understand that people are tired of our representatives just speaking for one side of the political aisle. But I'm approaching this race with what I believe is the humility and the modesty to look out for not what my best interests are or what a political party's best interests are, but what is the best interest for the hardworking people of District 4.
Man, it's just that simple, Conrad. I sure do appreciate you spending some time with us today, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, not just in this race, but across Louisiana, staying active and staying involved, keeping people up to date with the idea that there is another alternative and another outlook on these issues. Tell everybody where to find more info and stay up to date on your campaign. Conrad for Congress.
Yeah, so my website is Conrad for Congress 2026.com. And then we're on all the social medias. The handle is at Conrad for Congress. So that's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere. We have a profile. We really blew up on TikTok. We've been able to get a pretty good national following. If we could just tap into some of those more national donors, because to be frank and pragmatic with people, we're not going to have a chance to hold MAGA Mike Johnson accountable unless I can fundraise more money than what we're bringing in now. It's going to take anywhere from 1 million to $5 million, really fight back and punch him where he needs to be punched. We're not going to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to get our message out. I think it's a winning message because ultimately you can look at my website. What our platform is populist. And we believe that it is a popular agenda that the majority of people in this district support, even if it is an R26 district. I believe in the platform that we have because it is based on my experience as a working person who has lived in this state my entire life. So I really hope that you would follow us on our social media and also on our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, you can sign up to volunteer. And most importantly, please donate $5 to $10. And also, ask 10 of your friends to donate $5 or $10 because our collective action and our ability to organize on a grassroots level is what's going to be the leading winning formula to getting these guys out of office. Democrats in this state, we took for granted our popularity with voters, and the Republicans out organized us the last 30 years. And so we have to hold ourselves accountable and we have to do what we need to do in our neighborhoods, I mean, on our street and with our families first. That's how we turn this ship around. And that's how organized people beat organized money.
That's it. That's the title of the episode. Organized people beat organized money. Thank you, Conrad Cable, for helping organize some of us, man. That's the ticket. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Joel, thank you for having me on. And guys, I'm a member up here at the Ruston chapter of Indivisible. If you are not a member of an Indivisible chapter, please plug in and get involved. I met so many great people who are incredible advocates for our community. I've got some great friends. I really like Connor Welch in Baton Rouge. He's been a good friend. I've really enjoyed meeting him and the whole Baton Rouge crew a couple of times.
It obviously it's where I'm putting my energy and time right now and efforts, Conrad, but it is Indivisible is a great organization. And if there's not a chapter where you are locally, indivisible.org will give you the information on how to start one and connect with the national organization and get
Heck yeah.
involved in connecting your own community, because organized people are going to beat that organized money. Thanks again, Conrad Cable, the farmer from Farmville, running for District 4 in Louisiana against MAGA Mike Johnson. We appreciate you for joining us here on We Are Louisiana Indivisible.
Thanks, Joel. Have a good night, man.